Hello, hello, sound check, sound check. Hello. Sound check. Sound check. Sound check. Sound check, sound check. Sound, sound, sound. Hello, Danny. Can you hear me? It is good. It does sound good. Oh my gosh. Hey, where? Hey, Danny, where you want me to place a mic?
He can't hear you.
In here.
No.
Yes.
No.
He can hear me in here. I will mute
Danny.
this.
I have a soundbar.
In the name, is this on? Hello. It is on. Do you actually want us to say it?
I
Okay.
wasn't aware
back to Cali, Cali. I'm going back to Cali, Cali.
Keep singing it.
I'm going back to Cali, Cali.
That's awesome.
Under a sky no one sees, waiting, watching it happening. Don't hurry, give it time. Things are the way they have to be. Slow down, give it time. Still alive, you know I'm listening. The moment that you want is coming if you give it time. When you wake up, when you wake up, you will find me. When you wake up, when you wake up, you will find me. Under a sky no one else sees. Your shape appears in front of me. The sky clears, the sun hits. I'm here, waiting, it's happening. The moment that you want is coming if you give it time. When you wake up, when you wake up, you will find me. When you wake up, when you wake up, you will find me.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, Carmel Catholic. It looks like it's on. Do we want to switch? Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Okay. So.
This.
Testing.
Yeah, it's coming out. Okay. Good morning, Carmel Catholic. Please be quiet. Shh. Good morning, Carmel Catholic. It's very quiet. Good morning. May I please have your attention? Thank you for that. In a moment, we will introduce our special guest speaker and have this opportunity that is really exciting and beautiful. But before we do that, we would like to begin as we do all things, and that is grounded and rooted in prayer. So to lead us in prayer today, we have asked the presidents of the Social Justice Club to do that. And so if they could please come forward at this time.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Father in heaven, we pray for the patience to be understanding, the power to be forgiving, and the courage to accept the consequences of holding on to what we believe to be right.
Father, may we place our trust in the power of your goodness to overcome evil, and the power of your love to overcome hatred.
Father, we pray for clear vision, so as to see and the faith to believe in a world free from violence. A new world in which fear shall no longer lead men or women to commit injustice, nor a world where selfishness makes them bring suffering upon others.
Help us to offer our whole life and thought and energy to the task of making peace, praying always for the inspiration and the power to fulfill the destiny for which we were created. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Our Lady of Mount Carmel, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Good morning. So consider, can you make a difference in this world? Carmel and the church are all about teaching you that yes, you, each of you, make a difference. The Jewish Talmud teaches that to save one life is to save the world entire. Each life is precious. Today's speaker exemplifies the power of one person. Carl Wilkens will tell you his story and his background, not me. That's why he's here. But in homeroom this week, you saw a brief explanation of the horrific genocide that was perpetrated in Rwanda in 1994. When all foreign nationals were evacuated, Carl Wilkens was the only American who chose to stay. He has a story of risk, of compassion. He saved hundreds, probably thousands of lives. He returns annually, actually a lot more than just annually, to Rwanda with students and teachers to show them what happened and how to rebuild a community. I had the privilege of traveling with him to Rwanda last summer. I saw how highly regarded, actually loved would be a better word, for how loved he is. He has received various awards and recognitions. Last October, the nation of Rwanda awarded him the Unity Award, given to the individuals who show outstanding values and contributions in preserving the unity of Rwandans. So without further ado, it is my pleasure, it's really my honor to call him my friend and to introduce you to Carl Wilkens.
Good morning. I am just waking up my Apple TV here, wouldn't you know it? You see, Jim was just telling me about you guys and your work with Mind Leaps. And I thought, oh shoot, I gotta get a picture of Mind Leaps up on the screen here with you guys. Not that you haven't seen it, because I understand with your fundraising. Okay, there we go. Let's see if we got it woke up now. Everybody just say Apple TV. No, don't do that. Apple TV. I wouldn't you know it, trying to get in too many pictures at the last minute, and I mess myself up here. There we go. We're coming. Rebecca Davis, the founder of Mind Leaps, is a good friend of mine. She used to have a dance studio, a dance troupe, a dance team in Philadelphia. And when she saw what was happening around the world in terms of genocide, she just had to do something. She took her passion for dance, and I am just gonna unplug this for a minute. Plug it back in, and it's gonna work for us here. I got here even early this morning to make sure we had all of this set up together and working. Yeah, okay. And that one, we can clap in a minute when there we go. All right. All right. Now I'm going to give you, thank you. That's like three warm welcomes from Carmel. Thank you for all those warm welcomes. I'm going to give you some eye contact. I was in Rwanda in December. I hadn't been there for Christmas. Well, I wasn't there quite for Christmas, but just before, since 1995. This is on the way from the airport to the hotel. The center Round Point was just lit up with all these beautiful Christmas decorations. People really are blown away when they get to Rwanda. They have a hard time believing that this is the actual little country where so many people were killed 26 years ago. I want to just show you a little clip from Rwanda, and I'm hoping that tonight, there we go, I'm hoping that tonight, when if anybody at home hasn't given up on asking you what you learned in school today, you can say, I'm glad you asked, and I'll show you where you can find this clip on the internet. These guys were hired by the government to do a tourism film, but this isn't their tourism film. They were just so blown away by the gorgeous little country that when they got home, they put their favorite clips on Vimeo. And so this is, I won't play the full 8 minutes of it. Go ahead, turn the music up a little bit. I like this song. You've got to, yeah, there we go. Little more. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, now we're starting to hear it. Giraffes, volcanoes. Rwanda really has a little bit of everything. I call it the little big country. I think this guy was the driver for the film crew. They say they have the source of the Nile, but a couple of their neighbors are arguing with them. I often like to pause on these city scenes for you to look for trash. Rwanda has got to be one of the cleanest cities, if not in the world. When you're coming in for a landing, you know, they go, put your tray tables and seat backs in the upright position. And as you're taxiing to the terminal, they'll tell you, if you have any plastic bags, leave them on the plane, because plastic bags are illegal in the country, the whole country. Some of you who are really appreciating the passion of yeah, serious. That's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. And so I just wanted you to have a little peek, and where you can find this clip, if you, let's just go to a browser for a minute. If you type in on your browser, yeah, not AirPods, Rwanda Vimeo, you'll get that big icon right there in the middle of the screen. That's what I was showing you. So tonight, I hope you'll type in Rwanda Vimeo, and you'll join in with the people of Rwanda in helping them as they are reinventing their country. Rwanda is so much more than genocide. So this morning, I did grab that picture about mine. Oh, wait a minute. Do we know anybody here? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had a wonderful time this summer together in Rwanda. It was a tough time in terms of the memorial and talking to some of the survivors, but it was also a really inspiring time. This picture you might not think of as a dance picture, but this picture to me really captures the spirit of the dance program called Mind Leaps. Because the big guy there with his arm around the younger guy and the other one, it's people who have found hope through dance, and they're now passionate about passing hope on to others. There's a young man, I couldn't find his picture super quick here, I would have pulled it up, but much like the young man with the orange t-shirt, my other friend's name is Emmanuel. And Emmanuel was living on the streets before he came to Mind Leap's program and started their dance program. Emmanuel is now in high school, and I met with him not a year ago, I met with him. Yeah, spring break a year ago in Rwanda. And he was back at the Mind Leaps program. And I said, Emmanuel, he goes to boarding high school in Rwanda. And I said, usually during spring break, kids are doing stuff with their friends or, traveling or whatever. What are you doing back here at Mind Leaps? And he's like, this is like my home. And he's back there teaching the little kids. I said, are you still studying dance? Because he's gone off to high school now. And he goes, yeah, actually, twice a week, we have dance class. And I said, who teaches it? And Emmanuel said, well, he's a quiet, humble guy. He said, actually, I do. And I go, wait a minute. What? Yeah, they give me an empty classroom, and twice a week, this guy, because dance, it's his passion, it's his discipline, it's his expression of who he is, it's his release of stress. I'm just super excited that you guys got behind, especially you guys, got behind Mind Leaps. I hope one day you get to travel to Rwanda and meet them. And some of you who may be passionate about dancing, you may be familiar with Misty Copeland. You check out on YouTube Misty's work in Rwanda. She is a world-class ballet artist from New York, and she's gone to Rwanda. You'll find some interesting clips of Misty with Mind Leaps in Rwanda. I hope you'll check that out. So before we go back, though, to 1994, I understand that that you guys have been studying a bit about Rwanda. Some of you put together a little a piece that you played on the whole school. Who's the students who did that piece? Put together that you guys who put together the piece. Yeah, is there a hand back there? Where are you? Yeah, give those guys a hand. I really, really appreciate everything that people did to get ready to talk about today, because I do want to talk about some of the details. We will get into some of the details, but I want to get into the stories. Before we go back, though, I got to tell you, December last year, I got an email and an invitation, actually from the president, with a ticket. Come back to Rwanda. We're having Umushikirano. Okay, you got that? Umushikirano. That's not hard, huh? It's the Kinyarwanda version of the State of the Union address, only it's not American style, it is Rwanda style. And in fact, it's reverse State of the Union address. Instead of the president telling the people how the country is doing, and I'm not talking current politics, I'm talking any president in America, instead of the president telling the people how the country is doing, which I think is kind of bogus, the people in Rwanda tell the president how the country's doing. For 2 days, we're looking at this assembly, this state-of-the-art convention center. Okay, let me zoom in here. If I can see if you can see this. There's a gray-haired guy, right? You can see, whoa, there we go. You can see this orange t-shirt right there. That gray-haired guy is this gray-haired guy. Okay, no, you didn't need to do that. I just wanted to tell you that I was on the second row. Okay, let's get back here. I was on the second row 2 days of this reverse State of the Union address. You see the big screens on there that they had? They had event tents set up around the country, like, a wedding, a white event tent set up around the country, and people would come there with high-speed video connection interlink. They would be standing 100 miles away in front of this camera, and they'd be broadcast actually all over YouTube because it was live streamed. They were broadcast all over Rwandan television, Rwandan radio, and they would be talking to the president about how the government is matching the priorities of the people for 2 days. And it wasn't just everybody who was, we're okay, right? Yeah, we're okay. It wasn't everybody who was just, everybody who was just able to come in front of a camera, but it was also people who were twittering. Is that what you say, twittering? Tweeting. Okay, yeah. And people with Instagram, people with Snapchat. However you wanted to do it, you could send your message to the president of how the country, and they would start out by saying, Mr. President, thank you for this cancer hospital here in the remote corner of Rwanda. This is awesome for us, but the road is terrible. And thank you for the Early Childhood Development Center next door, in the county next door. We need one. They always started with thank you before they talked about what they needed. Here's the one, though, that was the real zinger for me. About 15 miles away, in another large state-of-the-art arena, there were 2,000 young people. And one of the young men who got the microphone, and now he's filling the big screens in the convention center. He's filling the screens of national television, YouTube streamed around the world. Thank you, Mr. President, for the scholarship that me and my brothers are enjoying. And for most of us, we're like, oh, that's cool. But then he went on to introduce himself. Now, before I tell you who he was inviting everybody who was Rwandan that was not in the country, come home. He says, why wouldn't you want to come home where there's security, where there's opportunity, where there's education, where there's health care? And here's the zinger. Dad, come home, he said. His father was the leader. You guys understand, during the genocide, we had a small group of men and women who were planning the genocide and who executed the genocide. This is not, his father, I don't believe, is in this picture, but this is the small group of men and women who planned the murder of more than 1 million people. And when they were finally driven out of power and out of the country, they went into the Congo, and for 25 years, they've been fighting from the Congo, trying to come back to Rwanda and finish the genocide, which is horrific to think about. And this young man, last December on national television, was saying, Dad, come home, because his father is now the leader of that group. Some would call them terrorists. Others would just call them genocidaires, people who committed genocide. And there's two things that were really powerful about this young man's appeal. One was obviously that he was asking his dad to leave the leadership of this terrorist organization and come home. But also, I'm like, wait a minute. Scholarships are not a dime a dozen. Scholarships don't grow on trees. Why in the world was the government of Rwanda giving not one, not two, but 3 scholarships to children of the leader of their arch enemy who's in the Congo? This is one of the just varied and one of the powerful demonstrations of restorative justice. How we don't blame the children for what their parents did. In fact, we take them in as our own family. We don't divide between Hutu and Tutsi, us and them. We let people on their own merit stand up, and we give them opportunities. I was just, as you can tell, really blown away by so many things every time I go back to Rwanda. Now, here's what I want to do. I'm going to do a fast version here. You guys, let me just, one quick story to help us make sure we're all kind of on the same page. I know you've talked about Hutus and Tutsis. If we grab this one right here, just a refresher, small group of people called Twa, then the other 2 groups, Tutsi and Hutu. And the Hutu and the Tutsi really were marrying each other all the time. Unfortunately, in the early days with the colonialists,
they gave priority to the Tutsis, and that would be this crazy thing called eugenics, which we won't dig into. But if you haven't, check it out. This is part of a sickness that was here in America, was in Europe, was all over the place, trying to figure out one group superior to another group. So I'm not going to blame the genocide on the Belgian colonizers and on their ideas of eugenics, but that had part of it. That was part of the story back then. And so they had this ID card. And back to my other story, I'm going to skip my history part here. My friend Gasikwa had a Hutu ID card. And the government had a radio station that everybody listened to and everybody trusted. Then the planners of the genocide started a second radio station. Since everybody already trusts this radio station, they started their own with really modern music, funny comedians, very, very angry and hateful speech, hate speech on it as well. And I want you, if you imagine, you know how radio waves, at least that's what they tell us, they do this kind of thing? Well, imagine these radio waves carrying a brick. No, 2 bricks, 20 bricks. They're kind of, okay, maybe they're light, but they're coming through, and you come in, and incoming, and you catch one of these metaphorical bricks. And it has a message on it. Here's 3 men who would be Hutu ID cards. 2 of those men would catch those bricks and believe the lie against the Tutsi people. Tutsis can't be trusted. Tutsis are like cockroaches. And with those bricks, they started to build a wall between themselves and the Tutsi, the other. Until finally, chunk, 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 the wall was so high, they couldn't see the face of their neighbor anymore. They only saw a poster plastered on there that said, enemy. Now, the other man on the right, representing my friend Gasikwa, he's got 40 people he's protecting in his house. His wife is Tutsi. The local government guy, he brought his wife and children to Gasikwa. Because Gasikwa didn't have guns. Gasikwa had integrity. What he believed and what he did matched. And he had 40 people in his home, and when they came to kill the people in his home, he could have said, hey, what's wrong with you guys? Hey, we're neighbors. These are children. And he wouldn't have, I don't think, been successful. Could have said, hey, everybody run. There was nowhere to run. Everybody hide. No place to hide. Instead, he comes out with chickens in his hand. And he calls his neighbor by name. I'm going to call him Bernard. Bernard, your daughters must be hungry, hey? Listen, you want these chickens? Now, Bernard has come to kill. I look at this picture, and I see killers. Gasikwa looks at that picture, and he sees neighbors. I look at that picture, and I see enemy. Gasikwa looks at that picture, and he sees father. And I could bet that Bernard, the night before, putting his little girl to bed, she's like, Daddy, I'm hungry. I know, babe, but tomorrow I'll find you something to eat. No idea that tomorrow when he's going to his neighbors to kill, he's going to be greeted with kindness. You see, guys, it's super hard for me to figure out how somebody can go from kind and generous to murderers. That's super hard to figure out. How do people do that? And I try to explain a little bit with like those radio bricks and this idea of believing things that aren't true and building a wall and eventually not seeing your neighbor but seeing the enemy. And we know that happens, this generous to murderers, because we see the bodies. But here's the part that's even perhaps more difficult to understand. Can they go from murderer to trusted neighbor again? That's a really tough question. So what I'm going to do, oh, and by the way, it worked for several weeks with Gasikwa. He kept giving out chickens and people lived. But eventually some soldiers came and they had lists because the genocide was very well organized, very structured. They had lists and they had managed to find the mother and father, one family, and killed them. And they had done their detective work, and they had tracked all the way down to Gasikwa's house to find the children. And they came, and by now the chickens were gone. And I don't know why they didn't kill Gasikwa, because many people who stood up against the genocide were killed. But they tied him up. He remembers being tied up outside on the ground and listening to the screams of the children. He did say most of the children survived. Some of them, I imagine that the ones the soldiers were especially looking for, did not survive. The other day on WhatsApp, he sent me a photograph of one of the kids graduating from university. Okay, let's just go back. You can probably tell by now that I would much rather talk about Rwanda today and the recovery process. Oh wait, I didn't finish this. This little neurological thing, this idea of how we store information, how we make new brain pathways, how we fire pathways and rewire our brain. I'm sure some of you have dug into this before, huh? But they are getting this information over the radio and other ways, and they're making new pathways, and they have done horrible things called genocide. And Gasikwa, however, wasn't buying it. He was not firing those pathways. When the lies came across the radio, he didn't buy it. He fired other pathways, pathways of compassion, pathways of empathy. They say that everything we hear, everything we see, everything we do either strengthens a brain pathway or multiple brain pathways, or creates a new brain pathway, or diminishes a brain pathway. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time, but this is what's helped me believe that people can go from murderer to trusted neighbor again. And we'll explore just a tiny bit more about this, but I wanted to just plant that seed about neural pathways. Okay, I am going to play 4 minutes of a video clip about our family's experience. And I want you to hear my wife's voice. I want you to hear Gasikwa's voice. I want you to see our kids for a little bit so you get a feel for the decision that my wife and I made. We can go ahead and turn it up. The decision that my wife and I made. We're not getting deep into the history, but this was, I will pause for a moment, this was about political turmoil. This is not about Hutus hating Tutsis. This is about politicians manipulating the needs of people, okay? So this genocide isn't one group hated, and they married each other more than they hated each other, but with some, like a few cells of discrimination, more than a few cells, but a few injections of bigotry and prejudice, and they can destroy those things. So this is a political event that's happening in Rwanda, not two groups who hated each other. And I won't, yeah. There is this group of rebels. In fact, when independence came in 1962, there was some violence against the Tutsi people. The Belgians thought they were somehow superior with their eugenics studies, and they thought they're superior, and so that discrimination they were doing caused people to be angry. And many of the Tutsi people were killed at independence. Many fled. You know, they're like, we'll get over here, we'll get safe, and we'll come back in when it settles down. 10, 20, 30 years, they weren't allowed back. Finally, they came back in 1990 with guns, and they're known as the Rwandan Patriotic Front. So we've got the characters of the story, the small group of men and women who are at the beginning of planning the genocide. Then we have a group of refugee soldiers called the Rwandan Patriotic Front. And then we'll also have the UN, which we probably won't get into this morning. And then we have the rest of the international community, the Rwandan community there. And so these Hutu extremists have the solution. They say, we've been at war for 3 years. We're going to finish this thing once and for all. We're going to kill all of the Tutsis. You're going to see a soldier reaching in a red pickup truck. He's reaching for an ID card. Often you couldn't tell who was who, and so they had to have the ID card. And you'll see a truck with speakers on the roof, and that truck is broadcasting, the president's plane was shot down. It's the Tutsis who did it. Get out, set up roadblocks, Secure your neighborhood. The enemy is living among you. And I'll just, at that, I'll let it play. Quit interrupting.
This is Tango Whiskey. Do you copy? Tango Whiskey. This is 7-6. Go ahead. Hearing some kind of disturbing things.
I think it was really interesting in Rwanda that when people were ordered to leave, for some people, the idea of staying didn't even occur to them. And of course, the killing going on around here, the smart thing to do is get out of here. Get those who you love and safely get them out of there.
The senior rebel official said the government forces and militia were responsible for the genocide of between 500,000 and 1 million people.
I spoke to several refugees who said there aren't going to be any Tutsis left in Rwanda.
But in every situation, we have a choice. I mean, the choices might be greatly restricted. There's people who'd like to take that choice away, and sometimes we'd like to give that choice to other people. But it boils down to really we do have a choice. And lucky is the person like me who had somebody like Teresa standing next to me making that choice together. Went to Africa the first time as a college kid. Came back to the States and fell in love. So as soon as I got married with this beautiful girl, 6 weeks later we moved to Zimbabwe. Our daughters were born there, so Africa just kind of got in our blood.
I didn't give him a whole lot of thought to what was ahead after I say I do. I knew he was an adventurous person, and I was excited about living overseas.
When we moved to Rwanda, our first projects were to build schools, working with ADRA, Adventist Development Relief Agency.
Yeah, I met Carl Wilkens in 1990. Time came to be director for ADRA. Someone was surprised how American young have 3 kids, fast that.
We were excited to be able to raise our kids in Africa. And Rwanda, like other countries we had been in, was very welcoming. The neighborhood kind of took our kids in as neighborhood kids.
The kids would go to school, Carl would do his work. I'd take the kids swimming, and on birthdays, we'd go camping. So it was very normal for us. We were pretty much untouched by the conflicts that were simmering underneath.
And we had 2 Rwandans working in our home, Janvier, the night watchman, and Anita, who not only worked in our home, but she lived with us.
And so this is the point, you know, where when the plane is shot down and the killing begins and the American embassy says, you got to leave, but don't bring any Rwandans. I'm going to just fast forward a tiny bit. You'll meet Laura Lane, who was the consulate officer in charge of the evacuation of all of the Americans. And let's play, well, Phil Lancaster, there were 2,500 UN soldiers there. Phil is explaining how the government was telling people, you got to kill the Tutsi or they'll kill you. This kind of kill or be killed mentality.
And Hutu citizens. And that's how they were able to mobilize everybody to this very twisted collective insanity.
Towards the end of that first day of killing, a gang actually gathered at our gate. We didn't know about this until the next morning, but we found out that our neighbor ladies had come out, stood between the gates, stood in front of these guys with clubs and machetes, and they said, no, you can't go into our house. They started telling stories about our family, doing little acts of kindness. Basically, they said, their kids play with our kids. We were shocked to find out that we had been targeted, but then even more amazed at the courage of these ladies. They risked their lives for us.
My first and only priority in many ways was finding out where every single American was and how we would get them safely out.
So it probably would be Friday evening. Teresa and I would start making the decision about what we're going to do, and especially about Anita and Janvier, who were targeted because of their Tutsi ID cards. The embassy had made it really clear that Rwandans could not be evacuated in the convoy, that would put everybody at risk. And so that option was out. Thinking that they could stay and barricade themselves in the house, nah, the house would be broken into and they would be slaughtered. And so really, there just didn't seem like many options, except if, you know, I was able to stay, perhaps my presence would stop the militia. There was a huge respect for foreigners in Rwanda, a real valuing of foreigners.
His personality, his heart was such that there was no other option because he saw people suffering and he can't just leave it and not do anything about it. For me, it's a matter of, can I stand with that?
My parents were visiting at the time, and I was really glad my dad could drive the family out so Teresa could be with the kids, but still.
I think Carl recognized it was a hard decision, not just for him, but yet we could be looking at the possibility of never seeing each other again.
The harder part of this decision was her part, definitely. Much, much tougher for her to leave with the kids.
And I know that at that point in time his thinking was, and I agreed totally, I knew as adjunct director, he's there for not just the development aspect, but for the relief aspect too. He's been already working in these camps. And so it just seemed that it wouldn't be right not to stay. The right thing to do is to stay.
I'll never forget standing by our bedroom window, looking out at the city, which is built on hills there in Kigali, and holding her and thinking, this is what it's come to, and this is the right thing to do. And so I'm on the radio now, and I was telling Laura at the embassy, I'm sending my wife and family to the American ambassador's home, over. She says, what do you mean you're sending them? We're all leaving, everybody, shredding documents, locking the doors, everybody leaving, over. And I said, no, I'm not leaving. He kind of paused, and you don't have a choice. And yes, I do have a choice, and you can see this going back and forth. And finally she says, okay, then I need you to sign on a piece of paper that you've refused the help of the United States government to leave Rwanda.
And I remember thinking how incredibly hard of a decision that must have been to be separated from his wife and kids and make the decision to stay. He had the opportunity, because he had an American passport in his hand, to leave the country and find safety. And instead, he was choosing to stay and let the people that he loved the most in this world go on overland without him.
In leaving, I did feel like, we were abandoning him. And though he tells me he never felt abandoned, I just, when we're all leaving and you're leaving someone behind, you do get that sense that you're abandoning them.
Teresa and I met in high school. She was a junior, I was a senior. So I always tell people, be nice to each other. I look at these things and I think about Teresa. In fact, if we come back here to our pictures and you look at this one picture of our family, this is actually a week before the genocide happened. My mom and dad were visiting. Kind of an interesting fact, my dad in this picture is 62 years old, and today this year I'm 62 years old. I'm the same age as my father that he was in 1994. And I look at this, I am so grateful that my father and mother were there. I mean, it made it hard to make the decision. You can imagine that what they thought about the decision. Teresa and I were in the bedroom, we were talking, we were praying, and we made this decision to stay. And then we come out to the living room, and I tell my parents, and I can barely begin to imagine what it was like for my dad, and he doesn't want me to die. I don't want anybody to die, but we don't want those two people in our house, Anita and Janvier, the young lady. They're like family, and now the American government is saying, well, we're all leaving, but you can't bring any Rwandans. We rightfully condemn the planners of the genocide for killing people based on their ID card. But here we were making a decision, the leaders of the free world, so to speak, at least some people's terms, and we're deciding whether we'll help somebody or not based on their ID card. And so when Dad finally realizes that, our mind is made up, and really it is our mind. It is not some kid. I remember where we were in Taiwan, and the kid during question and answer, he says, you must have really done a sales job on your wife. And I said, no, I didn't. Initially, she did think, the government has said you got to leave, then you have to leave. But when I said, no, the American government doesn't decide for us. We decide for ourselves. And because, everybody looks at authority differently, and we have different personalities, but as soon as my wife saw that perspective and realized, yes, that's right, it is our decision, then we made the decision that I would stay, hoping that this privilege that the Rwandans had given us for so many years would make a difference. And it did for some. It did for the 2 people in our house. They will survive. And as I think you might have heard a little bit about this story, I'll be stuck in our house for 3 weeks. Let me just pop this up here for a minute. Just this word genocide. A lot of TV programs start with a homicide, but this genocide stems from thinking, I don't even want to read the last part of this, because I figure every time I read it, I could be strengthened. That pathway is in my head. I don't want to kill anybody, no, but sometimes I think I can solve a problem by getting rid of somebody, by not dealing with them. And anytime I think I can solve a problem by not dealing with people, it's going to be temporary at best, and it'll be genocide at worst. So we're building new neural pathways, not genocide. Kindness stems from thinking that says our world would be better with you in it. How are we going to solve a problem with everybody in it? We are not going to blame and separate and divide, but we're going to instead, check out this. My friend Gasikwa, okay, let's make that a little bigger. My friend Gasikwa really represents, this is my little how the world works. Everybody wants purpose. Everybody wants community. How do we keep purpose and community healthy? We have an environment of respect. In an environment of respect, we start to learn each other's stories, and empathy begins to grow. If I ask you, do you have any brothers or sisters? I have 2 brothers. Older, younger? One older one. So you're the middle one. Okay, I got 2 brothers too. Both of them are older. As soon as you start telling me about your 2 brothers, I think about my 2 brothers. I think about how sometimes they beat me. Did you? Okay, no, let's not talk about that. But we start to connect our stories. As we connect the dots of our stories, that's empathy. Connecting the dots of our stories. And then we're like, well, wait a minute. What? And you doing anything this weekend? And I'm like, hey, you want to... How real is this speaker? But you understand that with empathy, this idea of inclusion becomes very natural. It's not like, oh man, it's my duty, it's my obligation to include. No, with an environment of respect, we learn each other's stories. It's exciting to me. I love stories. I'm curious. I'm like, do you have any brothers or sisters? A younger brother. He adores you. Okay, she's laughing. But anyway, we begin, as we learn each other's stories, we begin to connect the dots and empathy grows. So here's what's happening back in Rwanda. I'm stuck in the house for 3 weeks, 24/7 curfew. I'm not only there with the young lady who lived and worked in our house. I don't think I told you. I told you she lived and worked in our house. Actually, let me show you a picture of her and her family. They survived after the genocide. She got married. But this young lady loved on our kids. When anybody loves on your kids, that's like fast track to family. Fast track to family. So I can't say that too much. People still, after watching a film and hearing the thing, they're like, so why did you stay? And I'm like, they wanted us to leave part of our family behind, and we couldn't leave family. Now, it was easy in that she loved on our kids. It's sometimes not easy to see somebody as family, especially if they not only speak a different language or have a different political orientation or whatever these things are, but we are all one. I mean, I know that here at this school, you all get this idea. It's not our world, it's our Father's world. And it's not us who's inviting people to the table, it's God who's inviting people to the table. And it's not up to us to uninvite anybody from the table. So back at our house, we've got that young lady, young man, and this pastor and his wife. This is last April, so it's a recent picture. She's helping us get food to survive. When they come to the gate to kill the people in our house, she's diffusing the situation with wonderful humor, with generous, motherly, aunt-like aura about her. He is giving this deep wisdom and counsel, and he says, Carl, if you're going to do anything outside of the house, you've got to build a relationship with the people in power. Okay, now you understand, at this time, the president was killed and the extremists took over the government. And so the people in power right now are doing genocide. And this is a drawing of one of the men, Colonel Renzaho. Colonel Renzaho is in prison today for his role in the genocide, for organizing the murder, the torture, the rape, the horrible. How can I just go one right after the other and say murder, torture, rape, as if I'm just stating facts and I'm not talking about people's lives being destroyed? This is the man that they hold responsible for much of what happened in the capital city. And yet, he's going to become a partner, so to speak. He's sort of going to become a friend during this time. He will give me a travel permit that will authorize me to get through the roadblocks with the killers. He will say, hey, over here's an orphanage, Gasimba Orphanage. You can help them. This is crazy. A man who his mission is to kill thousands of people, and yet when I talk to him, oh yeah, there's an orphanage you can help. You see, inside of every person, we got this incredible potential for kindness and generosity, and we got this other side that is fearful, this other side that is arrogant, this other side that is confused. Fortunately, during the genocide, I was able to access some kindness in the hearts of people who were killing. Now, I never know how far I'm going to get as I'm telling these stories, and I know now I'm not going to get to this story. The orphanage that he sent me to, we were surrounded one day by 50 guys with machine guns. They had come the day before saying they were going to kill everybody. They understand there's Tutsis here. Yeah, we know there's kids here. Hutu, Tutsi. We don't care who. Empty the place because we're coming back tomorrow. I don't know why they gave warning. Usually they didn't give warning. But I won't go into the details. Here's the deal, guys. If you would like to, at the end of assembly here, usually when I'm I forgot to ask this administration. Hopefully they'll be okay with this. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask forgiveness later. But I try, during the genocide, I made tapes to my wife and children about what was happening. Basically, the first 2 weeks of the genocide, I was arguing with God, saying, look, God, you wanted me to stay, you keep me alive. Stupid. As if I love myself more than God loves me. As if I know what's best, and I don't. After 2 weeks, I quit arguing with God because I was getting nowhere, and I finally said, okay, if I don't survive, you will take care of Teresa, you will take care of the kids, and you'll take care of me. And so I said, but if I don't survive, I want to leave something. So I started making cassette recordings. So by the time the genocide was over, I had about 8 hours of stories. This little book, I try to bring them with me every school I go, and if you'd like, it's just about 1994. This is not about a reverse State of the Union address. This is not about Maria and Filbert, who I'm probably not going to be able to tell you about either. But I have that story written up, and I'll share that with your teachers. This is just about the 3 months of the genocide. So if you like, you're welcome to come and if you could make a donation, that helps the books go to other schools. $5, $1, whatever you want to do is fine. You could bring it tomorrow. I'm sure that your teachers would help us get the donation. But let me give you the last 7 minutes here. If you have 1 or 2 questions, and we might get in 1 or 2 more stories. I know it's kind of like I hit you with a lot of information like a fire hose. And so, is that a hand up back there? Just scratching your head? That's fine. I used to be like the fire department bake sale auctioneer. You just bought the pie. If you don't have a question, I'm like giving you your chance, and I don't feel bad because I have one more story. Okay.
So what's the what's the primary language they speak in Rwanda, or was it English? Did you have to learn another language to be able to communicate with people?
You bet. Language is so important. So important. Rwanda's language is called Kinyarwanda. So that word I told you, the reverse State of the Union, Umushikirano, that's Kinyarwanda. Then there were Germans. That didn't stick around long. When the Belgians came, French became the second language of Rwanda. Today, English is the language, the third language, but the language of school, of instruction in Rwanda. When we went there, they told me you have to learn French. I really regret. I mean, I'm happy I learned French, but I really wish I would have learned Kinyarwanda, because then I would have been able to connect more with the hearts of the people. Learning Kinyarwanda, but I learned French. Thanks for asking about that. Yes.
Could you tell us what happened at the orphanage?
It's not funny. I'm just thinking, okay, so I'm surrounded here. These guys, I show up the next day with gasikwa and water. These guys surround us. We have about a 2-3 hour standoff. And the short version is, I'm on the radio talking to the Red Cross, and a Swiss man gets in touch with the police department. And he sends some police officers to the orphanage. And I say to this lieutenant, can you, about 7 of them, can you spend the night with the kids? No way, he says, we're outnumbered. And he says, this is what you need to do. You need to go talk to my commander and get us reinforcements. And I'm like, oh, no, wait a minute. Some police officers have been killing. How do I know this guy won't join in with the other guys and kill? Maybe he just wants to get rid of me. But then it's going to be dark, and in the dark, anything could happen. The worst will probably happen. And the young brother of the director, about 24-year-old guy, he's basically crying as he's begging me, don't leave, they'll kill us. So that was probably the hardest choice of the genocide. It was a hard choice to stay, but that choice was clear, and I made it together with my wife. This choice this day to leave the orphanage and trust that police officer was really hard. It wasn't clear, and I was alone. I will end up going to the office of the colonel who was out of town, and his secretary will say, yeah, the colonel's not here, but the prime minister is here. Now, they killed the prime minister after the plane was shot down, this lady, and this guy with the beard is the new prime minister who is in charge of the genocide. And this lady is telling me, ask the guy who's in charge of the genocide to stop the massacre, and he does. I won't get into all the details. I think he wanted to use those kids for his own purposes, to attract French soldiers to the center of the country to prop up his failing government. Whatever his motivation, those kids were alive. What's really important in this story, 2 things that are super important in this story. One is, it wouldn't have happened without listening to the local people who were there on the ground. 2 is, it probably wouldn't have happened without being present. If I wasn't present, there is a power in presence that we often don't fully comprehend or appreciate. Thanks for asking that, because you're right, not everybody's going to read the book. And there is a 40-minute film that we can, Jim, you have the link to that, don't you? We'll share it. No, it's not on YouTube. It has a password on Vimeo. But there's this, what I was showing you, that film, if you want to email, I can send, but your teachers will get the link to them. There's reasons it has password. But we got just like 2 or 3 more minutes. If you would like one more question. I am going to just hopefully whet your appetite then with I'm going to try to do this in 3 minutes. Maria and I are close to the same age. I was 36 at the genocide, she was 35. We both had 3 children. We both had really tough decisions with our spouses about the safety of our children. I'll decide with my wife, because we have a passport, they can go to safety. Her and her husband don't have anybody help. they split up. She takes the little girl and their little daughter. He takes their sons, hoping that in small group we might survive. It works for her and the daughter, doesn't work for the husband and sons. The guy next to her, she introduces as a family friend. Oh my goodness, she says, I can't imagine how we would get on, my daughter and I, without his help. In the garden, everywhere. He does stuff for us like our sons would have done for us, she says, if our sons would have been here. Now, that's how I'm introducing him to you as a family friend, and that's the truth today. But this summer when I was there with the group, we were introduced to him as being in the killing squad who killed her husband and sons. I didn't say that first to you because I didn't want to happen to you what happened to me. As soon as I heard that this summer, boom, a wall jumped up. I thought I had dealt with a lot of my anger and bitterness about the genocide. I thought with different people I've worked through this. But this summer, man, anger and bitterness is so tricky. It's like little cells of cancer inside of you. And there was nothing I liked about that guy as soon as I heard. He seemed phony to me. He didn't seem like his confession was authentic. There was like nothing. I didn't like his posture. He didn't seem like, I don't know, maybe I wanted him standing there with his head down or something. I'm not getting into the whole story with you, but I want to tell you the journey that he went through and she went through. This idea that somebody who went from generous to murder to generous again. Filbert is his name. Filbert confessed. In his confession, Maria found out where her husband and sons were buried. Think about that for a minute. Even if Filbert wasn't sorry, I never thought about this before. Somebody who's not sorry, I think their confession is meaningless. Not true. Even if they're not sorry, their confession can tell us the truth. And in Maria's case, all the things she was thinking for years. Did my boys die slowly? Did they die together with their father? Are they even dead? Maybe not. We have that kind of irrational hope. She learns the truth from his confession. She can process this now. He then goes to what you call a reinvent yourself camp, where people who have done genocide get a chance to do projects in the community. They can go to church on the weekend if they choose to, huh? Let's imagine we're in church in Rwanda. Amazing grace. It's song service, okay? How sweet the sound. And then all of a sudden we look, and in the door comes one of these ladies from the, okay, I call it a reinvent yourself camp. Maybe some people call it a killer camp. And you're like, okay, she's not in her uniform, but she's from that camp. And then she starts singing, and she's got a beautiful voice. That saved, okay, not like mine, but imagine, that saved a wretch like me. And you're like, whoa, she can sing. Now come back to our neural pathway thing for a minute. I got a massive neural pathway. My sleeve is the myelin sheath. The more I fire it, the stronger it gets. Killer, genocidaire. Now I hear her singing, and I got this tiny little pathway that begins to form in my brain. She's a good singer. Now I've got a choice. When I go home and I tell my brother who didn't go to church, you wouldn't believe who came to church today. I got a choice. Do I call it a killer camp? Or do I call it a reinvent yourself camp? Because all of my phrases, all of the way I think and work can usually fit into two, well, it's not, I know it's generalizing, but we're short here on time. If I call it a killer camp, is that restorative or polarizing? Pretty obvious, huh? I have another choice. Do I tell my brother that she's a good singer? Or do I ask my brother, I wonder how many people she killed? You see, I have a choice which pathway I fire in my brain. And am I thinking in restorative terms? Or am I actually not really thinking, but ending up being in polarizing terms? Maria and Filbert will begin to build houses together, and Maria and Filbert will start having new pathways in their brain about each other. I will say their story is unusual, but Maria would probably argue with me if she was here. So I'm not going to say that. But I know for myself, it took me a month to reframe Filbert and not simply define him by his worst choices. Those are two of the biggest things for me from the Rwandan genocide. One, I have choices as to what pathways I fire. Am I going to look for the good, or am I going to go the easy pathway of the bad? Number two, am I going to define people by their worst, or am I going to give people a chance to define themselves? You guys have been an awesome group of listeners. If you have questions, thanks. If you have... Thank you, guys. If you have questions, you're welcome to get in touch with me, or you can send them through your teacher. And like I said, if you'd like a copy of the book, you're welcome to come on down here and get a copy of the book.
So let me start real quickly by saying a very big thank you to Carl Wilkens, not only for sharing his story and giving us something to think about, but for the choices that he made 26 years ago that saved people and created this situation. So again, a giant thank you to him. My last thought for all of you is one of the abiding messages today. This is about choice. You have a choice. All of us here have a choice. And so I would urge you to use your opportunity to take choices and to make wise choices. We'll look at this more in April with Genocide Awareness Month, but it's all about what you choose to do. Have a good day.
Before you may leave,